Boom, boom. We are live, everybody. We are live. Welcome to LinkedUp on LinkedIn. I'm Peter Clarke with Red TV, and I'm excited today. I'm excited every day, but I'm excited today because we get to talk about things that intersect, that mean a lot to me, and I think a lot to people in business and industry, and also in our communities. And so this is where the world of talking about social impact and doing good in the world and business as a force for good and philanthropy all kind of come together and have a conversation with that. Look at that person over there. Does she look smart or what? This person's super smart. We got a super smart person. So I'm going to have to watch myself today because she's going to show me exactly how smart I am. So I want to introduce to everybody, please welcome Stephanie Robertson. How are you?
I'm very well, Peter. I'm very well. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, so awesome to meet you. Like we literally just met a couple minutes ago. Now, we stay connected on LinkedIn, and I think that's the magic of building community on LinkedIn and on other platforms is that you meet people, but you don't know them. And so it's not until you have that conversation and so on. So first of all, before we get started into the show today, you and your family, everybody, 2020, everything okay health-wise? Everyone safe and sound?
Everyone's safe and sound. Thank you very much for asking. Yeah, no, we're doing great, and we're very grateful for being great. Yeah.
That's the key word right there. Grateful, gratitude. And so, no, we've been all counting our blessings this year. That's for sure. So there's so much. First of all, we always encourage everybody watching, go out to LinkedIn, everybody, and check out Stephanie's profile. And then you'll learn so much more than we can cover on the show. You can dig into her background, what her business does and so on. But for those, there's 750 million people on LinkedIn. I'm going to assume there's a couple that don't know you or I.
Yes.
There's a couple. So just in case those couple are tuning in right now, let's talk. Can you give us a little rundown of your company, generally speaking, and what you do and what you stand for?
So Simpact Strategy Group is my company. Social Impact, Simpact. That's how I got the name. And I set it up in 2004. And I actually set it up as a for-profit business in 2004. Against the advice of many people who thought I should have set it up as a nonprofit or tried to become a charity. But what we do is we seek to demonstrate the value of investments in community and society. And we do that through, helping people tell their stories, but typically tell their stories with metrics and numbers, and often using a technique called a social return on investment that will actually help you to express the value of outcomes, social and environmental and financial outcomes, all blended together. So that's what we do.
Wow. Oh, there's so much to unpack, and I love that. That is okay. That's fantastic. And again, I simplify it myself just because, again, I'm a very simple person. Is business is a force for good. I think of it that way. I mean, there's so many different verticals we're talking about here. When we're talking about social impact, whether it's social entrepreneurialism or businesses using their brands and their economic strength to make a difference in the world, all those kinds of things. But so there's so much to unpack there. But let me start with something that you use as a phrase, and you talk about this a lot, which is social value thinking.
Right.
Social value thinking. So can you explain to somebody generally, like just the average person on the street, what is social value thinking?
You're so kind, because you've given me one of my favorite soapboxes. So I'll try to say it really, really,
You're talking to me, so keep it nice and simple. It's all good. Keep it nice and simple.
So the social value movement actually came out of a frustration, I suppose, that when we look at, return on investment, traditionally the focus is always on the investor. And if the investor got their money's worth, without much consideration of the impact of the activity that the investment was funding on the people that were also impacted. So, in a pure business sense, if you are getting a return on investment because you're selling a great product and service, the value of your customer, in theory, is incorporated into the way that you're calculating the return on investment of your activities. Social value thinking basically says, okay, first of all, while my investor is really important, my investor is not the only stakeholder that matters. The stakeholders that also matter are the people that could be impacted environmentally, the people that could be impacted socially because their land has been, appropriated without their permission, because they are getting paid minimum wage as opposed to a living wage. So
Right.
social value thinking actually starts saying, okay, this is my activity and this is the investment I'm thinking about making. Who are the stakeholders that are going to be touched? Excuse me, I've got a cold, so I'm just sucking on a fisherman's friend here.
No problem. You take your time. It's all good. It's all good.
But who are the stakeholders that are going to be touched by my activity? And is that impact material to them? And if so, we need to value the impact on those other stakeholders alongside how we are valuing the return on investment from a financial perspective. So social value thinking is actually considering the stakeholders around your activity, the impact on those stakeholders, and whether or not that impact is financial, social, or environmental, and wrapping your head around those impacts and considering all of the really important ones and valuing those important ones as we think about, am I going to make this decision? How am I going to move forward? And how am I going to know whether or not the impact or the outcome of my activity is a success?
Right. Beyond just measuring it financially, like you said, looking at just a P&L statement, a return on investment, it's like, hey, I give you $1, you give me $1.50 back. I won, but there's much more, like to your point, making that 50, there's 50%, whatever it was that came back to the investor. It didn't take in the human side, the capital, nature, cultures, all those kinds of things. You're talking about all kinds of different things that impact. I anytime you mention that, I picture all kinds of different things that happens in the world where industry goes into a certain part of the world and, promises sort of social outcomes while they're able to go and take advantage of the resources that may be there. Those are always sort of the first things that pop in my mind as an individual, because we're talking about such a big subject matter, social value thinking of making sure all the stakeholders sort of have a seat at the table and part of the conversation, and then of course have some sort of positive return, and that could be social. It doesn't necessarily be monetarily. I'm wondering what we can talk about when it comes to the average person. So I keep referring to someone like me, average person, consuming every day and so on. It's such a large concept. How does the average person, the consumer, the citizen, make that part of their thinking on a daily basis? Are there things that you talk about that can help me find ways to bring that into my everyday life?
Well, I mean, I think the simplest one, honestly, is to ask whether or not the company is prepared to pay their employees a living wage. Because there are so many people who are working, like we've seen, multiple jobs and still not able to keep it together because they're not actually being paid a living wage. And the difference between minimum wage and a living wage is actually hugely significant from a person's quality of life perspective.
Right.
So we should all be, there was a whole group of CEOs in the United States last year, 18 months ago probably, who signed declarations that they were going to focus on climate change and becoming carbon neutral. And that's all great. But if they do not also commit to addressing inequality across their supply chains and through use of their products, then we will never, ever meet our climate objectives. Because when people are living hand to mouth, they can't be sustainable. They can't be sustainable environmentally, let alone socially. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's certainly not top of mind. It's funny, it's the way you said that resonates with me, because I often think, and if I'm in a conversation where those sort of you're butting up against that sort of commentary, it's like when you see people in, say, let's just use refugee camps for example. The thought is, well, why don't they just rise up and rise up? And it's like, well, when you're in survival mode, you're not rising up. You're trying to get from moment to moment, hour to day.
Yeah.
And like you said, if your quality of life is at the survival level, I don't know if social value thinking is on your mind, right?
No. It's interesting because there's an amazing organization in St. John, New Brunswick, that I've had a chance to work with called the St. John Learning Exchange.
Okay.
And they really help people transition from being long-term unemployed to employed. And they're very, very good at what they do. One of the things that they do, though, is they help not only people to match their opportunities to meaningful, like it's meaningful work, it's living wage, but it's also within their reasonable transportation district, just for example. So a person who wants to continue the best job in the world, if there's no bus and they
Right.
don't have a car, they can't access that work. And so, like, I don't think that we realize how much stress we place on society by offering people opportunities as employers that are not helping them really truly make ends meet. And that's one of the things which, when we're talking about what we can do as individual people, we can really take a look at the kind of employer we're buying our products and services from, and to see whether or not they're treating their own employees well, fairly, and with dignity.
That makes so much sense. And that crosses over so many subjects, especially human rights, equity, these kinds of things. When you start talking about how do you, as an average person, being a consumer, and how do you have that social thinking in your mind when you're, it's kind of like speaking with your wallet, as we say, right? You can vote with your wallet because you can go and find out what a company does when it comes to like you said, supply chain, and where they are in the world and what their record is when it comes to those kinds of things. I think it's really interesting, again, that social value thinking it's one of those concepts that we all know we need to have these discussions, but it's just hard to get people to sit still long enough to even kind of give it some thought, because there is some cerebralness to it, if you will. You have to give some thinking to it. I want to read something to you because I think this is important, and I want to make sure I preface it right, so it's just something that I think is important to address. And I want to read a quote from something that you wrote, and it basically says social value thinking rejects any action that worsens inequality,
Yep.
whether deliberate or not, or otherwise. Instead, it prioritizes actions that will make our society more sustainable, which is increasing understood to be, for example, financial, social, and environmental. So for some people in the world, they might interpret things like that as anti something, anti-progress, anti-industry, anti whatever what position they're taking on that. And I think it's the opposite. I think those conversations are the opposite of that. But I'm wondering if you can address that kind of criticism. So when you say to a particular industry or a company or a CEO or CFO whose instant response is, well, that kind of thinking really doesn't work in our industry. It sounds like you're pushing against our industry, or I'd like for you to address that kind of thinking if you can.
So actually, I love that question because, and my answer sort of started while I was doing my MBA, I suppose, in the late 90s, last century. But I don't actually believe there's a whole bunch of people that wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'm just going to destroy the planet today. That's what I'm going to do. Those people don't exist. Well, there might be one that we might name, but we'll save that for another time.
Funny, I chuckled. I knew who you talked about. Keep going.
But, and actually this is why I called my company Simpact rather than CSR or something different. Every organization has a social and environmental impact just because it exists. Like nonprofits do, social enterprises do, governments do, corporations do, we all do. But actually, what we often don't have is a really clear understanding about what that impact is. So, I actually might have no idea that I expect people to pay me on a 30-day cycle, and yet I pay my small business suppliers on a 120-day cycle. And I'm squeezing people I don't know that I'm doing that. Well, actually, if you understand what your social impact is and your environmental impact is, I believe what you will do is the things you're doing well, you're going to do more of, and you're going to keep trying to do them well. The things you're doing, okay, so you're probably going to prioritize to see whether or not you can make a little progress. And the things that you discover are going to be on your risk radar, and you are going to look at how you're going to make those improvements over time. But unless you actually understand what your impact is, then you are so uninformed about really how you are presenting yourself to the world. And that's why in that statement I said, intentional or unintentional. I think a lot of it is either unintentional, and at a certain level of the organization, the very, very highest, I do believe there's very little that is not known, but there could be many impacts that are not documented in a way that somebody would therefore take responsibility for doing something about it or not, right? And I believe that because there aren't people that wake up in the morning with this huge vision to do bad things, I think once you articulate what your impact is, then you step back and you look at it and you say, okay, I can do something about this today, and I'm actually going to think about how I'm going to deal with that tomorrow. But unless you have that just real map of what your impact is, doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit, for-profit, or a government department, you are taking the risk that you are having less positive and possibly negative impacts in all kinds of the areas of places that you touch across the stakeholders that you have in society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you're not aware of it, you can't act on anything you're not aware of. So obviously you need someone from the outside sometimes because you're so close to it, you can't see it.
Mhm.
Someone on the outside can come in and someone like an organization such as yourself or whatever, when you talk about from a consulting perspective or whatever, can look at it from the outside in, and be able to kind of assess maybe some of the things that maybe you're not thinking about. So it's not really an attack on, obviously we're not attacking any particular industry. We're not attacking. So, instantly when you say, okay, we have global issues like climate change, instantly we think of energy. So, but there's a lot more going on with climate change than just energy. I mean, it's a lot of different factors. So the instant, I live in Western Canada, so you can imagine instantly this is the position, as opposed to just trying to have the conversation, not talking the political side of it, not talking about some of the things that have been decided by one government or another, but it's about the idea, can we have at least the conversation of thinking that everything you do has an impact that trickles down much farther than just climate change. It goes into, like you said, human rights, inequities, these kinds of things, correct?
Yes, and the only thing which I probably should say though is that the only thing that the social value movement is against is the false belief that financial return is the only thing that matters. That is the only thing that I would say that universally the social value movement would just reject, this whole notion of shareholder primacy over any other value.
Right.
And if you listen to people like Jed Emerson, for example, who's an incredibly motivating, brilliant person who has really been the grandfather of this movement. Oh, he might not like that, a leader. But for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Exactly. He will say so emphatically that value, like dividing value, financial over here, social over here, environmental over here, is like, that's a completely false notion.
Right.
If you look at the risks that companies are facing now, the greatest risks are environmental, and you look at the value that's being destroyed because of the lack of attention to the value they're either creating or destroying environmentally, which
Right.
for sure will have social implications, and now is hitting their balance sheets. Like the way that we as society have been encouraged over the last, sort of people would say starting in really in the late 70s, early 80s, and into the 90s, to sort of separate financial return as though it's the only thing that really matters to the people
Right.
that are really serious. That would be the only thing that I would say that the social value movement would be against.
Yeah.
In
No,
fact,
that makes a lot of sense because it's almost it almost defines what you do.
mhm,
So there has to be almost an opposite to it, sort of the yin and yang in life. And, there obviously if someone is talking that we need to profit no matter what, that's probably against the kind of philosophy that you're talking about right now.
mhm,
We're talking about business. We've been talking about business. We just even mentioned about supply chains and what the average person can do when it comes to being a consumer and an aware consumer is
mhm.
probably even a way to describe it. Let's talk about business as a force for good. It's just a
Yeah,
very general concept in itself. I've had some other guests on the show, and we were talking about the worlds of philanthropy coming together with business, and because we have such big giant problems, as you well know. I know that you study this, so this is what you do, and all of these issues are certainly not going to be addressed only by government and philanthropy alone. I mean, there's going to have to be some way that business finds its way. Now, some big brands are doing that. They're aware that it is also a very positive economic marketing strategy and branding strategy
yeah.
to actually do good and make a difference, and you can be profitable. So some are jumping on that. So let's talk to those few leaders out there or organizations that are still sitting on the fence with that, sitting and they're scared to put themselves out there or their brand out there that cares about something because they don't want to be labeled as whatever that negative association they think is. Let's maybe they're scared to go out there and talk about the environment or poverty or inequality. What kind of conversations are you having with anyone who's sitting on the fence in a leadership role about that?
There's, the the Edelman survey that just came out a couple of months ago, perhaps even in October, middle of October, really started speaking to that in Canada in a way that's quite new, in the sense that we've seen in the US, for example, a real movement of looking to leaders of corporations to make statements on, on things that matter in terms of diversity, human rights, environment, gun control. It's, some of the issues in Canada are very different than they are in the US, but some of them are very, very similar. Diversity and inclusion is a huge one. Black Lives Matter, looking at reconciliation in Canada. These are, very important issues. And I think the thing that we're definitely seeing is a real desire and hope that corporate leaders will take a stand and express what they think is valuable about Canadian society, that they are prepared to also invest in, to sustain and grow. The CEO of the TD Bank actually spoke about that in October, just really encouraging people who have the means to give, either individually, corporately, and not really about it being how much. It's really more the act of investing, because it's not possible for government to do it all. Michael McCain, to his credit, has stepped up on the food security front on a number of occasions. So, and IKEA Canada, for another one, is another one that's actually really stepping up in terms of making housing homes for people through organizations like the Furniture Bank, in partnership with the Furniture Bank. So I just think that there's a real opportunity to be a more human leader, and
Right.
that
I
and
like
that
that. I
people
like
are
that.
looking for that. They're looking for that. They want to admire. I don't think they expect perfection, but I think they would like to feel like they're looking up to corporate Canada that's leading, not just because of the financial bottom line, but because they care about being part of the fabric of this great
Yeah.
country. Yeah.
Just tied right into our communities. I mean, this is the interesting thing, and I've had these conversations where I like what you said about segmenting value. It's the same thing with about segmenting literally ourselves by either what industry we are in, whether we're profit, non-profit, and so on. It's like I always think about it like Saturday morning going to the rink with kids, for example, right? I
Yeah.
mean, everyone jumps in their car and takes their kids to the rink, boys and girls. Um, that person over there could be a firefighter. That person over there works for a nonprofit. That person over there, we're all, so day in day out, we're all just trying to kind of figure things out. How does this work for all of us inside of our community? So I like what you said about the human, like a human leader, like someone who is really um, in tune with the idea that they can make a difference from their business decisions with these big brands and big opportunities to have these discussions. Let's face it. I mean, someone like what I can do, I can amplify those voices. But you mentioned a couple leaders right there, some brands like IKEA and so on, and some of the large financial institutions. When they speak, people listen,
Mhm.
and so it has a ripple effect throughout how we all conduct ourselves and do business, right?
You know what they do in the UK, which I actually think we should do here, is they actually have a prime ministerial award for
Oh,
business leadership in the community. And
oh,
so this
I
is
like that.
I know. I think we should start this campaign together. But I think, if we really, really, really want business leaders to step up, I think we should acknowledge the innovation that they're showing at
Bingo.
the highest level of government. That's what we should.
Bingo. I love that idea. I love that idea. Let's see. I mean, let's face it. Recognition, it's just part of our society. So if it wasn't the case, we wouldn't keep score in hockey games and things. I mean, bottom line is we do acknowledge when people are doing good, and we should amplify that. It's very similar to a concept I've been working on for many years about the philanthropy channel, the concept of having a television channel that does that,
Mhm.
that amplifies the people that are doing good. Why wouldn't we support a business that is actually taking steps that trying to make a difference? Yes, they're trying to be profitable, but they're trying to balance that against everything else that weighs out. Why shouldn't we applaud them? Why
Mhm.
wouldn't we put them on the cover of a magazine? I agree with that. I think that's great. Hey, we'll talk about that. That's maybe I think we got an idea there. That's fantastic. I know that this is a conversation. I mean, there's so many conversations going on when it comes to this year specifically, and I don't want to time date this video with where we are, but we are technically in 2020. But this period in history, if you will. I mean, we're certainly going through some really interesting times globally, and of course, the impact is going to be felt much farther down the road. I'm just wondering, with what's happened in 2020, and as we move into the future, um, all talking about social value thinking and the things we're talking about right now, and then also the mood with young people. I'm wondering if you can tell me, or share with me any conversations, or what's the kind of messaging that you would be using or are using when you're speaking to younger people, whether it's a family member, young people about the future and how they can play a role in solving some of these giant problems we're talking about, these challenges.
Mhm. Um, I guess one of the things which we're just trying to do within our own family, I suppose, is really focus on the empowerment piece. I mean, there
Yeah.
was a young woman from an Edmonton high school. I can't remember her name. She won this incredible award last week, and she some amazing technology. I'll send you the link. I just think to
Yeah.
myself, I mean, she's 16.
Right.
Like incredible. And so, just really in trying to encourage, I suppose, a vision for having impact and for problem solving. I mean, some of the things that, even my son comes up with, he's only 7, but he starts talking about, the problems that he'd like to fix. And I think, okay, well,
Right.
yeah, let's just there's unfortunately lots of options to choose from in terms of problems that you might try to fix, but just really encouraging that whole notion of, yeah, no, I can make a difference. I can do something. I'm going to put my creative power towards that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering again if they don't hear it from at home. It starts at home. If they
Mhm.
don't have these conversations at home, they're certainly having different conversations, meaning that they're learning whatever they're learning somewhere, and it normally starts at the home. And that's what I'm wondering, when an organization like yourself and the people that you talk to and so on, let's face it, they're normally not in their teens or early 20s. They're normally even at C-suite levels, and some of the things we just talked about, whether stakeholders in large companies that are investors, they're normally not 18. They're normally older, which means we're kind of stuck in our ways as we get older, and we don't see the possibilities. I'm wondering if 2020 will have a negative impact on younger people of feeling empowered and feeling like they are in control, because this year has been feeling really out of control. Do you think, how do we address that? I wonder, how do we have conversations like that with a 7-year-old son to say, hey, things are going to be okay, the sun's going to come up, and you can tackle these things and you can be part of the solution? How do we talk about that, I wonder?
It's so interesting because like I would say that, even though I've been involved, I suppose, in Social Value International for, so the Social Value Matters in September, the conference that we had, there were people from 34 countries involved. It was just like, that was my dream come true in terms of just the ability to have a conversation that didn't have boundaries.
Right.
But despite that, I have in my own life and work just been overwhelmed by just this tsunami of information that's been, just like the whole world is your potential customer, they're your potential employee, they're your potential friend, they're your competitor. And so, like, on one hand, I think what we really need to do is to really find a way to emphasize what really matters to us, so that instead of being so overwhelmed, I suppose, by all of the options and all of the potential, you can really focus on the things that you feel you're going to make the most difference within, and actually be comfortable with the fact that you can't, while you can change the world, you don't have to take on the whole world, if that makes any sense.
It makes complete sense.
And maybe what we really want to focus on is starting to put pieces together as we work within our community, be it very physical or be it very issue-based. And then as those pieces come together, then it grows and you add to it, and you have the, I guess, the experience or confidence that you are in fact making a difference. I don't
Hey,
know.
you mentioned, sorry, jumping, you started talking about your conference. Please expand on that a little bit. Just tell everybody what conference you're referring to, a little bit about it, and then of course, I'm going to assume it's going to show up again in 2021 and so on. So, talk to me about this. You just said this open discussion at a global level where there's no boundaries for the conversation. It was all ideation, if you will, and sharing of information. Tell us a little bit about that conference, and because it sounds very, very inspiring.
Well, so I actually, Social Value Matters is an international SVI, Social Value International conference. That's, this 2020 was its fourth year. Last year, I was lucky enough to go to Taiwan because it was held by Social Value Taiwan.
Right.
And as I sat there, I was just blown away, and I was so inspired by all of these people who had interests very similar to mine, but from a part of the world that, had I not been lucky enough to actually go to Taiwan from Toronto, I never would have had the opportunity to listen to, Naina Subatra Bewal, who actually leads the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, which, by the way, in 2020 has actually matched, I think, more than $12 billion in impact investment fund, like across Asia. I could go on. So I'm thinking, okay, so I would love to host the Social Value International Conference through Social Value Canada in Toronto, in order to bring the opportunity for these people to engage with North American participants in a way that was really inspiring. Well, first of all, Naina, who actually ended up being our opening speaker, I did ask her if she would be our opening speaker in Toronto, but she said, look, there's no reason for me to fly to Toronto, and then we had COVID, and we were naive enough, foolish enough, depends on how you look at it,
Yeah.
to actually say, well, we're going to try to do this anyway. And, what ended up happening was we ended up having a much more international conversation than we ever could have dreamed of. And, the first, Nina from Singapore was our opening speaker. And the people that were on the discussion panel that followed were in Berlin, in St. Johannesburg, in Toronto, in San Francisco. And that was the beginning of the day. The end of the day, our final speaker was based in Auckland. Our facilitator was in Melbourne and
Right.
was joined by an amazing Canadian colleague in British Columbia. So, in the 8 hours in the day, we literally went all the way around the world. And we
Yeah,
did
you followed the sun. You followed the sun. Yeah, I
it was,
love it.
and we talked about everything from the importance of philanthropy as the foundation for impact investing. Like, you don't have opportunities to have significant impact as a for-profit investor unless someone has done that philanthropic foundation work first, because
Right.
that impact investing money is going to grow something. It's not necessarily the right fit to start something from scratch. And I think people miss that a lot. I think, some people think, oh, philanthropy, that's old school. I want to do the impact investing stuff. Well, actually, all of that wonderful impact investing and a lot of the social innovation that we're seeing, it's coming from a bedrock of philanthropy,
Right.
which is exactly what the APVN, that $12 billion in 1 year alone. I mean, they invest across the gamut. It's phenomenal.
Right.
We talked about, you know, accounting, mainstream accounting. Jeremy Nichols, who's the founding chair and now on the board of Social Value International, with Rob Zukoski at Harvard, who's he's the director of the Impact Weighted Accounting Initiative. So there's, for those of you that get really excited about
I
accounting.
was just going to say, everyone's going like, accounting? Wow.
Exactly. And then Marcelo Liu, who's the president of BASF Canada. And BASF is part of something called the Value Balancing Alliance. Value Balancing Alliance started with a number, 10 or so, of European-based companies who are looking to put the value of social and environmental impact on their balance sheets and report on it in their financial reports.
Wow. No,
So
yeah, identifying something that's normally considered intangible and putting it down as an asset, if you will.
absolutely. And Marcelo
Wow.
would be another amazing person to interview on Red TV, because he is here in Canada. They're launching a pilot with a number of other companies. He's the president of BASF Canada, as I said, but he is personally pulling together a group of companies to pilot this approach, because they're so committed to not only the fact that it's the right thing to do because you can't divide value, but also because the information that you have to run your organization is more complete and more useful when you really truly understand what the impacts are, because then you can identify your risks, you can see how you're impacting stakeholders that in theory matter to you. Well, if they matter to you, then you should actually have a sense of
How to track them, how to account for them,
exactly.
right? How to demonstrate them somewhere within, which is what a lot of businesses are obviously very focused on. It's always the P&L, the profit and loss statement. They're always worried about the balance sheet. And they're always worried about shareholder value.
Mhm.
And you can somehow, some way find these so-called intangibles and somehow account for them, as you just said, and being able to show it as an asset, something that is actually a real something of value, right? It all makes so much sense the more you have these conversations. I think the reason why I'm always so interested in trying to bring these conversations into Main Street as opposed to Bay Street and Wall Street is because I don't know if we think about it all the time. That's why I was asking some of those other questions. If we can start having social value thinking in our wallets when we're actually deciding what to do, I think it makes a lot more sense than when we hear these conversations. We're going, oh, so when I buy something from that company that goes to that supply chain and so on, now there's a different understanding of the impact I can have, and
Hmm.
not necessarily have to worry about giant things that I'm trying to solve, and not be overwhelmed by that. So no, I appreciate that. We're definitely going to learn more about that. We're again, I encourage everyone to go out to your LinkedIn profile to make sure they see what you do, and some of the things to do with that conference, because of course it's going to happen again. And yeah, no, I'll definitely be in tune with that one in the future. Again, I only learned, I must say I've only learned about it this year, so uh, I will definitely be more in tune with it for next year. Let's let me ask you this before we get to some fun. I know you're not expecting any fun today,
Oh, yeah.
because these are subject. Listen, we're talking about we're talking about climate change impact, all that kind of stuff. You don't think you're going to come on Red TV and not have fun? We're going to have some fun, just so you know. But before we get to the fun, let me ask you this question, because I think it's so important, not just for this year, but I think this year more than ever, and in conjunction with the subject matters we just talked about. Let me ask you, not as the CEO, but as just a fellow human being here. What kind of things right now? What keeps you hopeful? What keeps you hopeful, and what keeps you optimistic these days?
I was thinking I was in the car this morning and I was listening to the CBC and Jesse Wente, who is he's the chair of the board of the Canadian Arts Council right now, but he's also the arts one of the arts commentators for the CBC show in Toronto. And he was asked the same. He's Indigenous, by the way. And
Okay.
one of the things that he started talking about was, you know, what has happened that he's observed is this incredible solidarity amongst people.
Right.
Solidarity. People standing behind, you know, Black Lives Matters protesters and protesting with them. People really looking at some of the things that are happening with and for and to Indigenous people in Canada and saying, you know what, this is not okay. We need to do something about that. Me Too. I look at how hard the teachers are working to keep the kids safe and at school right now. The solidarity, which is actually, I think, strengthened the fabric of our communities, even though it's been a really hard year. I have to be very honest. I'm stealing Jesse Wente's words, but I just thought, absolutely, like there is such solidarity amongst people that really do want to build something that is better than how it has been. And I think that is incredibly hopeful. I think I also think of just some of the environmental technologies that are being developed. I'm less knowledgeable in the environmental technology field, but I still feel there's some really smart people trying to make some massive difference. You've got Brookfield Asset Management actually thinking that they're going to do well for their shareholders by financing all of this technology that's going to need to be implemented. I think, okay, well, that might be positive,
Right.
So that
Right.
stuff gives me hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. That I think, and I love that word. I mean, solidarity. The idea that people are who may have been a little bit more quiet, have since, because now, of course, a lot of people are spending more time online for business reasons and so on, because of the pandemic and so on. So people are getting used to being online and engaging. They're supporting things that, and being a little bit more vocal than maybe they wouldn't have been if they were just doing their daily lives of getting up and 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and kind of in that mode of just kind of living, versus being now home a lot more, connected with family a lot more, or disconnected, by the way. I mean, either way. But the solidarity that's come from some of those, I think, yeah, that's certainly worth being hopeful about. And hopefully economically, of everything that we've seen, maybe as you suggested, maybe some businesses are going to start thinking differently of where they put some of their capital, where they put some of their support, to actually help those that are willing to put themselves out there, and fund some of the things that are really important. Because as we talked earlier, it is a great way for brands to start positioning themselves as being part of the solution, and not necessarily part of what we think is the problem. So no, that gives me hope as well. I agree with you 100% on that. Okay, listen, there's no way we're going to leave without fun.
I'm
This is you should there's no nervousness to this. There's no nervous this see because you are always on shows, I'm certain of it, or you get interviewed or you write for things. There's let's face it, these are big subject matters, right? There's not a lot of chuckles in there, right? There's not a lot of chuckles in there. And we don't get to know people. So on this show, I've come up with something called this or that. This
okay.
or that. And it just is so simple and they're
Yeah,
silly. They're silly,
yeah.
but they're meant to just kind of go, oh, okay, I'm going to learn a little bit more about Stephanie that I wouldn't normally learn if I was at one of these conferences talking about global climate change. Okay. So I wouldn't learn. So I'll throw out something for you. And all I want you to do is this or that. It's just fun. It's just fun. And I'll preface some of these to make sure that I'm not insulting anybody who's that. So first of all, if you drink alcohol, fine. If you don't, I'll have another one for you. But if you drink alcohol, whiskey or wine?
Oh, wine.
Wine. Do you like whiskey at all? Just curious. Do you like
Oh,
whiskey
no,
at all?
I'm a fan, but I don't like to tell my secrets too early in the night.
All right.
Yeah.
Actually, wine. Wine. Okay, wine it is. Okay, Spider-Man or Wonder Woman?
Oh, Wonder Woman all the way.
Okay. 60s music or 80s music?
60s.
Oh, nice. Okay, Beatles or Stones?
Oh, I don't know. Stones probably, but I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm not an aficionado. I don't know. I don't know. That's a tough one. Can I have a tie? I would
No,
take.
there's no ties in these. If you
Okay,
just had to pick, you had to pick one album and go to the island. Which
I'm
one?
gonna
Stones or Beatles?
change my. I'm gonna let it be the Beatles.
Oh, nice. Okay, good call with that. Good call
Mhm.
with that. How about Chinese food or Italian food?
Italian.
Yeah, I know. Pasta.
Deli.
Oh, I could have pasta for breakfast. I
I
mean,
know.
it's crazy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that. For traveling, Europe or the Caribbean?
Europe.
Europe. Yeah, history. You like that kind of stuff? You like is that reason why?
Uh, partially, yeah, partially the food, the history, the just the landscape, like the
Yeah.
stone. That's just it's the buildings. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny you mentioned that. I was talking to somebody yesterday about traveling, and I love Ireland. So my liver's Irish, so that's why. And and I was thinking about the age of our countries. Like we're 150 something years old here in Canada, and the states were they're under 300. You know, you go over there and their doors are like 150 years old. You know, the last time they changed the windows was 100. I mean, it's just so much history, right? So much. Yeah, I just love that. How about this? How about truck or convertible?
Convertible.
Oh, there you go. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Sunrise early. You like getting up early? Okay, good. Love that. How about this one? Fame or relevance?
Relevance.
Couldn't you use fame to become relevant?
Yes. Yes, you could for sure. It would be nice to be fame, lottery, and then relevant. That's what
And
I
then
I would like that. Fame, lottery, I'll be relevant. Yeah.
that's me. That's me. Actually, it's just reverse. It's just like lottery first, and everything else. I'll figure out the other stuff later on. That's good.
Yeah.
How about this one? How about this one? Hope or freedom?
Um, well, hope, without a question, hope. And I can tell you a story about that, but
Please, please.
so one of the things which I've always been very lucky, I have worked as a service provider to many organizations that have moved me. One of them is an organization in Ottawa that provides support services to Indigenous women who are facing various challenges. And they wanted to do a social return on investment on a program that kept women who were pregnant and parenting together with their families. Both if they have a family during or if they're pregnant, they keep the family together through alcohol and addiction issues.
Okay.
And so the social return on investment was all trying to express the value of the outcomes that are associated with this. And of course, health, all kinds of incredible outcomes that you would expect. But one of the things that I learned was that the women that they work with had often either never experienced or had forgotten how to hope.
Wow.
And in the absence of
Wow.
hope, you
Yeah.
don't hold on to the change that will enable you to have a different and hopefully better future. And
Mm,
that's always stuck with me because I didn't even attempt. I definitely described, because it was the most important piece of the story, is their ability to enable that woman to experience hope, and
mm.
therefore to have hope as a reason for her to achieve change and sustain that change into
Wow.
the future.
Wow.
Anyway, that's why.
That's powerful. That's powerful because, I often think about the idea of either one of those. When if you had to choose either or, this is why it's fascinating. But it's interesting. You can have a lack of freedom, but still have hope.
Mhm,
But when you don't have hope, I mean, freedom means nothing. I mean, there's lots of people free in our country or around the world, who don't have hope,
mhm,
and it's like you said, there's a different impact when it comes to that. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I know people probably watching this show might think, God, Peter always repeats this, because I just find it super inspiring and thoughtful about hope. Is there's a phrase, and I'm going to find out who had this phrase or created this phrase, but the idea is that a human being can live basically 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water,
mhm,
3 minutes without air, but not 3 minutes without hope.
mm, mm,
Or 3 seconds, sorry, not 3 seconds without hope.
mhm,
So once you lose hope, you lose everything. So no, that's a great story. I appreciate you sharing that.
mm.
See, those weren't too hard. So let me ask you to finish this for me. This is the last one for you. So finish this sentence. I love my life because.
Oh, because of my son, and because the work that I have been given the opportunity to do really means something to me. Um, those are, I mean, family for sure, but those two reasons would be at the top.
Fantastic, fantastic. I just want to throw up Jacqueline Way is watching the show today. Hey, thank you, Jacqueline. Appreciate that. What a story of hope. See, there you go. Your story of hope just was shared, and it is powerful. Hope is very, very powerful. Stephanie Robertson, how cool was this? You are awesome. I had a great conversation. I hope you did too. I really appreciate your work. I appreciate your insights here, talking about social impact and all of the things we talked about, because these are subjects that we even jokingly talk about counting and things like that, balance sheets and social value and things like that, but it still trickles down to the last thing you just said. I love my life because my son and the things I get to do. That's all we're trying to do. We're
Mhm,
all just trying to do it together, and if we can get business and government and philanthropy and everyone kind of on the same page. I always kind of think of it like your mind, your mouth, your heart, your wallet, and your feet all moving in the same direction.
mhm.
That's a pretty cool thing to do. That's a pretty cool thing to do. So I hope you had a good time, and I so appreciate what you do. Let's stay in touch. We'll do this again, right?
I'd love that, and yeah, this has been a blast. And am I allowed to say nice things back to you, because you're
Not really.
amazing thing. I'm so excited to have um, become more familiar with Red TV. I'm a big fan. I'm gonna tell everybody that I've been lucky enough to be interviewed by you.
Oh, come on. Okay, that's it. We got on that note, we got to go. But listen, I super appreciate that, and stick around after the show here. I'm going to finish up real quick here, but I'd love to chat with you a little bit more
Okay.
just before you go. And everyone, please go out and check out Stephanie Robertson on LinkedIn, of course, and follow the websites and the links and so on, and find out more about what she's doing and what her organization does and stands for. And that's the whole point on LinkedIn. A lot of business people, C-suite people are on here. So hopefully they'll find you this way, and they'll be able to connect with you, and great things will happen because of that. So I hope that's the case. So thank you, Stephanie. It's been a pleasure. Been a pleasure.
Thank you,
Been
Peter.
a pleasure. Everybody else out there, hey, be kind. Just be kind out there, everybody. We'll see you next time. I found a new friend, and we traded a pen for this soccer ball. And I thought it was really nice because I just gave him the pen because he'd been helping me throughout the day to learn Kinyarwanda. And he's a very smart boy, knows English very well, very good English. Yes. So I gave him a pen, which they love pens, and 10-15 minutes later he came back and gave me a ball for the trade. So I just thought that was really, really cool because I didn't ask for it.
Let's see ball.
So
Umupira. Umupira.
Yeah, pita. Yeah, so he gave me that, so I'm really, really happy about that, and I'll be bringing this back to Canada. And yeah, I thought it was awesome. He's a really, really, really clever kid. He's going to be an English teacher.
Professor.
Yeah.
English.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you.